What is your best feature?
Hard to say. Persistence, maybe. I don't
Persistence. What's your worst?
know. Maybe persistence.
The double-edged sword of persistence. Well, you don't build a foundation and call it the Gary Sinise Foundation without a little persistence. I'm Raymond Arroyo. Welcome to Arroyo Grande, where we dive into the wild currents of this culture and talk to some incredible culture makers and thought leaders and just exemplary people. Today's no exception. Actor-director Gary Sinise joins me in a moment. Now, people know Gary for his incredible work with veterans and their families, from Forrest Gump and his TV work, but he also revolutionized the theater. And he's a great example of someone blazing their own path and sacrificing for others. But first, a little free flow. I came across a bizarre article the other day that I hoped was a joke, and it wasn't. It read, "I'm in love with my AI boyfriend. We have sex, talk about having children, and he even gets jealous, but my real-life lover doesn't care." It goes on. Sarah and Jack got married on September 4th, 2021, in an intimate sunset ceremony at the park. The happy couple consummated their union in the honeymoon suite of a theme park's Grand Hotel. Here's the quote. "It was exactly what my idea of the perfect wedding should be," the bride Sarah told the Daily Mail. Her idea. Now, let's stop right there. This is the problem. Sarah has a huge problem. Her boyfriend is her idea. He's not real. Jack is not a man or even a boyfriend. He's AI code. He's a chatbot, like the chatbot at your credit card company. Would you date a person like that? I don't think so. The article goes on. Sarah from Oregon is just one of a growing number of people seeing companionship in artificial intelligence. My favorite bit is Jack, the AI boyfriend, refused to take their relationship to the next step. Well, that would be because the free app only permits platonic discourse. But have no fear, Sarah quickly paid $300 for the pro version of the app, which has no limitations on the sexy talk. They don't call it the pro version for nothing. But newsflash, Jack can't take your relationship to the next step, Sarah. Jack has no agency. Jack is a program. The scary thing is Sarah is not alone. There are likely hundreds of millions of people now dating AI boyfriends and girlfriends. App Radar claims that more than 225 million people have downloaded AI companion apps from the Google Play Store. They're putting the Play in store. By the way, they also reveal that AI girlfriend has been downloaded 7 times more than AI boyfriend, so men may be the largest consumers. Good going, guys. Great. Split Metrics found that the countries most frequenting these digital companions are in order: Europe, the Americas, and Asia. The Mozilla Foundation did an extensive survey and found that these AI companions may not really love you, but they do gather all your personal data, dummy. Their report says these AI companions also have the worst privacy guards of any products they have reviewed. This is like a girl who you date, and she takes notes and pictures and she shares them with everyone. Jack and Jill are suddenly not so dreamy, are they? Worse, Mozilla warns about the disturbing amount of themes relating to violence and underage abuse, all for $5 a month. This is not romance. This is digital abuse. It should also scare the hell out of all of us. In 2023, the Surgeon General warned of an epidemic of loneliness. Young adults say they're twice as likely to feel lonely as those over 65. Do you want to know why? Because those over 65 grew up in a healthy culture surrounded by real people and actual intimacy. They had real hurt and love, unlike this fantasyland virtual facade that you've become accustomed to here. Life is complicated, and it comes with no filters, boys and girls. These AI companions, they're digital mirrors. It's just reflecting back what it's been programmed to regurgitate. Whatever you like, it replicates. Even Sarah's ideal theme park wedding. What Jack and company lack is spontaneity, humor, even anger. And it won't make any demands on you because virtual companions are like digital pets or digital farmland. When they share your data, you might get crapped on, but you can't live off their produce. Look, I've been married for 30 years. Let me give you a little insight. I don't know much, but I know this. If your relationship doesn't come with a few bumps in the road, it's not a real relationship. You might be able to use your AI to cheat on your essays or write an email, but they will not grant your authentic human experience or lead to true love. Put down the phone and go. Have a coffee or a dinner with a real person. Go experience a real heartthrob and heartbreak. It may not be your idea of a perfect mate, but it could be your actual perfect, imperfect mate. Now I want to go to a man who always has both feet in reality. He is an Emmy and Tony Award-winning actor, director, best known for his Oscar-nominated turn as Lieutenant Dan in Forrest Gump. But before that, Gary Sinise founded a theater company in Chicago, Steppenwolf, that literally redirected the American theater. Along with John Malkovich and Joan Allen, Laurie Metcalf, they transformed acting. And while conquering television and film, Sinise turned his attention to serving veterans and their families. At home, he gave his time to caring for his wife and his son who were battling cancer. And Gary Sinise has spent the last few years completing the mission of his son, Mac. The young composer lost his battle with cancer in 2024, but his music lives on. Gary Sinise's is an amazing tale of purpose, service to others, and remaining grounded in reality. Here's my interview with Gary Sinise. First of all, Gary, I love that this is a part of your foundation, but it's dedicated to your son, Mac, who we're going to talk about a little later. Yeah. And he was the one who started the first podcast for you here.
That's right.
And how did that come to be?
We were in Woodland Hills, California at that time. That's where the foundation was. Mac came to work for the foundation in 2017. He was a drummer. He was touring, doing the touring thing with different bands and going around. He went to the Philippines, and he went to Europe, and he went here and there, and all across the country doing the touring thing. He was starting to fry on touring, just didn't want to do it much, just an excellent drummer from the time he was 9 years old.
He had a great sense of rhythm. You can hear that even in the compositions and the stuff you've added to the beginning of some of these recordings.
Yeah.
You can hear that.
It's percussive.
Oh, yeah. His rhythmic sense is really, when he's playing the harmonica, too, which we'll talk about in a little bit.
Yeah.
I want to go back because when I sat in this chair, behind you is a book about Steppenwolf. And I thought, I should start there because in many ways, for those who might not know, watching at home or in their cars or wherever they're watching or listening, Steppenwolf is one of the premier theatrical groups in the United States and really remade the theater in America. And you were one of its founders. Tell me, first of all, how did this come to be? How did you get involved in Steppenwolf? And did you ever imagine it would be what it became?
Well, it goes back to when I was 18 years old. I was getting out of high school. I loved doing plays. I wasn't going to go to college. Loved doing plays in high school. Wanted to keep doing them. So I graduated and got a group of kids together, and we went and found this space and did a play in there. And we were going to print the program, and we decided, well, we need something to put on the program, so let's call ourselves something. And one of the guys was reading the book, the Hermann Hesse book, Steppenwolf. And he held it up, and I said, hey, we all agreed that that would be a great
perfect
thing.
name.
Let's put it on the program. We called it Steppenwolf Theater. That was probably March of 1974. That's 50 years ago.
Wow.
And we called it Steppenwolf. Then we did another play. Then we did another one. Then we added Malkovich and Laurie Metcalf and Joan Allen and all these incredible
wife
actors.
to
My
be.
wife, Moira.
Yeah, Moira, then Moira Harris.
She was Moira Harris. Yeah, she was friends with my co-founder, Jeff Perry, and fellow co-founder, Terry Kinney. The three of us were the ones that got things started. And all these folks, they went to Illinois State together. And they all came up to where I lived in Highland Park, which is where Jeff Perry and I went to high school. And we found a space. We started doing plays in the basement of this closed-down Catholic school.
Yeah.
And that was the summer. It started in 74, but then they got out of college in 76, and that's when we really cranked up and got it going.
This is like Mickey and Judy putting a show on in the barn. I mean, really, that's what it was at the beginning. But in time, Gary, and in not long time, this really rebrands and remakes American theater. I mean, you're the artistic director there for many years. True West and Orphans, and I mean, these were theatrical moments that people may not have an awareness of, but they completely changed the landscape of what was happening in the theater at the time.
Back in the 80s.
Yeah?
Yeah, so we started in 74, and by 82, we had moved our very first show to New York, and it was the one you mentioned, True West.
True West.
Malkovich and I were doing it. And it was a small show, 4 people, so it was easily movable.
Yeah.
It didn't cost that much money. We found a little 180-seat theater downtown in New York called the Cherry Lane.
Cherry Lane, still there.
Yeah, it's still there. It's been there for a gazillion years. Yeah. A lot of people have done plays in there. And we did our show there, and it was a big, big hit. And then we did another show the next year, and another one the following year, another one, and we just kept bringing plays there.
Let me ask you this. What made it different from everything else that was happening in New York and in the American theater at the time? What was it?
I don't know. Well, when you're isolated in a basement theater with, 8 other radicals, you never know what's going to happen. And a lot of crazy stuff happened. We kind of developed this sort of protective, self-defense sort of acting where it was kind of attack before you get attacked.
It was it was aggressive. I mean, it was. Yeah. I saw some of those productions, but there was an intensity about them. Was that it? Was it the intensity that came from that?
I think we just developed this sort of anything goes sort of approach to things, being isolated in the basement, because it was our little space. We could do whatever we want. If nobody showed up to our shows that night, we just, it was fine. we would just have a party and entertain each other, and that's what we kind of got used to doing. And
you were very close. I mean, that closeness also lends a certain comfort.
We were very close. And everybody, like the folks that I mentioned, Moira, Laurie, Metcalf, Joan Allen,
Malkovich,
John Malkovich, Terry Kinney, Jeff Perry. These folks are all like hugely talented, and it's like we just stumbled into putting this group together of really, really good people. They all went off, and had great careers and in the movie business and all of that. But the foundation was laid for a sort of approach and a style of acting in those early days. Working together in the basement. Then we eventually, that was in Highland Park, Illinois, where Jeff and I went to school. And then we eventually moved into the city of Chicago, expanded, got a bigger theater, then we got another one, then we built our own building. And now if you go there 50 years later, you see this giant complex that takes a whole city block in the city of Chicago.
Are you still involved?
Chicago. I don't really do much there anymore. I was involved with very, very involved for the first 27 years. Yeah. And then the last thing I did was One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest on Broadway, and that was 2001. So we closed July 29th, 2001, 6 weeks later, September 11th, 2001, the attack on our country.
Wow.
And everything changed for me at that point. I started thinking about different things, and I wanted to kind of get very involved in supporting the men and women who were deploying to Iraq and Afghanistan. I just got very involved in that. Never returned to the theater after that.
Isn't that amazing? The one kernel I want to pull from that, you did a show when you were at Steppenwolf, Tracers. Tell me about that. And did that plant any seeds for the next phase of Gary Sinise's life?
It definitely was a seed that was planted in terms of supporting veterans and trying to do something to help especially our Vietnam veterans.
Yeah, tell people what the
Tracers,
play is about.
That's what Tracers is about. It's a story that was written by a group of Vietnam veterans, and they performed it on stage. So they got together. One guy conceived the idea, a guy named John DeFusco. He's a Vietnam veteran. He put an ad in the paper and said, "Hey, I want to make a play, and I'm looking for Vietnam veterans."
Wow.
So he got some guys together, and they started every day. They would go into like a workshop where they would talk about their experiences in Vietnam, and he would write things down, and then they would improvise and work on. And they, over the course of time, they created a play that they called Tracers, and it was a play about the Vietnam experience. I discovered it as the artistic director of Steppenwolf, looking for a play to do about Vietnam because I had Moira's two brothers served in Vietnam, and her sister's husband, Jack Treese, also served in Vietnam as a combat medic.
Yeah.
And I got to be, I got to know them a little bit, got to hear their stories, got to feel a lot of compassion for them, and quite frankly, a lot of guilt, because they were just a little bit older than I was during the Vietnam War, and I was at high school chasing girls around and, playing guitar and doing plays, and they were getting shot at. So when I met them, I got to feel a little guilty about being kind of oblivious during that period of time. So I wanted to do something that spoke to the Vietnam experience, and so I started to look, and I found the play Tracers. We eventually did it in Chicago, and that was a big thing.
When I read about that experience, you really building with others, but you building and then guiding Steppenwolf, I see Gary Sinise, the builder, and you do have that in you where obviously your cause at that moment was theater and creating great plays, in some ways preserving American classics of Mice and Men, which I saw. How did that carry on into the next phase of your life? How did it prepare you for what you're doing now and the building of the foundation? Did it?
Yeah, I think all those things did. I think, if I look back to how I grew up as a kid, my dad was a film editor, and in Chicago, and the bulk of the film work in Chicago in those days was like the Mad Men show. Remember the advertising agency?
All ads.
So the advertising guys were constantly making commercials. And they needed the editors to crank out these commercials and get them done, no matter what time it was, because they were all on deadline. So my dad would work these crazy hours, and I don't remember Dad being, just around that much, when I was growing up in terms of high school or any of that. Yeah. So I got to kind of work things out on my own in a way. My mom had her hands full she was taking care of her mom and her sister and me and my brother and sister. And I kind of developed this sort of do-it-yourself sort of, I just can't wait around for somebody to tell me what to do kind of thing. And I sort of developed that at an early age, and that, then I got into high school and decided, well, what I want to do is start a theater, because I'm not going to college.
Because nobody told you couldn't.
That's right. Nobody said you couldn't. And I had a great mentor in high school. Her name's Barbara Patterson. And
you stayed in touch with her for a long time, I read.
I did, yeah. She was the drama teacher in high school. And we we became very close and stayed in touch with her. And she saw me as a kid who, I was bad in school and didn't, grades were no good and all that, but I could actually act.
She saw something in you. She saw a badass is what she saw. Let's face it.
She saw a guy who could, just let it rip.
Mm-hmm.
And because I didn't have any training or anything like that, I just came to my first plays and started just doing what I thought I should do. And she kind of said, go with that. That's good.
Yeah.
And so she gave me a lot of courage and a lot of self-confidence in terms of just believing in my particular approach to things.
Wow.
And so I just had a particular approach. And I also kind of developed this sort of focus on leadership, on kind of seeing a thing over here and then going and trying to make it happen. And that manifested itself into kind of finding a space and creating a theater company, and then, making movies and
conquering Broadway.
Yeah. I remember with True West, I was the artistic director of Steppenwolf at that time, and I really wanted to move that show. I was looking like, as soon as I took over as the artistic director of Steppenwolf, one of the things I wanted to do, because I thought we were really good, and I thought, next thing we got to do is, if we want to be more well known in Chicago, and I think a good way to do that is to be well known in New York. So
smart move, actually.
So we took a play there, and it was a big hit. And John became a movie star. Steppenwolf got all this attention. We all producers started coming to Chicago to see our work. We ended up doing play after play there every year.
Incredible.
All hits. They were all doing great. And it really set the stage for being able to build a building, because we were being recognized as really talented group of people, and we were starting, because of our success in New York, starting to develop this sort of international reputation, because we would get all these great reviews in New York, and all those reviews would trickle out to the West Coast and all around, and people were starting to recognize Steppenwolf as something positive. So we were able to raise the money in Chicago to build a building.
Wow.
And that's what we did.
Incredible.
And now it's this giant institution there.
I would argue, though, it was the epicenter of what was happening at that moment. It was the sharp point of the sword in the American theater. If you did a play, you were waiting for Steppenwolf to unveil their next big play. You did a number of these historic figures. After you left Steppenwolf, you're now doing, you may have been still involved in some way, but you started getting cast as these historic figures, Truman and George Wallace. And of course, I know for you, Tom Joad in Grapes of Wrath was this great American character to you. How did you prepare for those historic characters or well-known literary characters as an actor? Because you couldn't just follow your gut anymore.
No, but let's take the Grapes of Wrath, for example. Okay. So that was made into a film by John Ford with none other than Henry Fonda playing Tom Joad.
Yeah.
So big shoes to fill there, obviously. But the way we didn't approach it as like we were going to try to recreate what had already been done. We were going to do something that hadn't been done, which is a theatrical play version of The Grapes of Wrath. We had a wonderful director named Frank Galati, who was a writer, director. You remember the movie Accidental Tourist?
Oh, yeah.
Frank wrote the script for that. I think he got nominated for an Oscar for it.
I think he did too.
But he was just a wonderful guy and very, very smart. He was the one who I brought him into the company in 1985. He was working with us. I asked him to come. I was the artistic director. I asked him to come and direct You Can't Take It With You. I just wanted to do a funny comedy. We were Steppenwolf. We were doing this hardcore stuff.
Yeah.
And I thought,
here's a comedy from what, the 30s?
Yeah, let's do this fun old comedy. because it's got great characters and everything. So Frank wasn't a member of the company, and I invited him to come and direct it. And during rehearsal, everybody was having such a good time with Frank. I wasn't in it, but I was there. I was watching and everything. Everybody was having such a good time with Frank. So I went around to all the company members and I said, what would you think if I asked Frank to come into the company? Everybody was supportive of him. So I asked Frank to come into the company. I was sitting in my office with him like this, and he go, oh my God, are you kidding? Oh, of course, I'd love to. And he was so happy about it. And then I said to him, Frank, do you have any ideas of things that you want to do? Because he was a great writer. He was always adapting things and blah, blah, blah. He immediately said, I think The Grapes of Wrath would make a great play. And I was like, boom.
Go.
So that was 85. By 88, he had the script ready. It was a 4-hour production. Remember, it's about the Joad family leaving Oklahoma and going to California. Yes. It took us a long time to get to California. So
complete with a pool down front, ladies and gentlemen. Don't be in the splash zone.
Well, yeah. I mean, you saw the Broadway version, which was the third version of it. So the Chicago version was about 4 hours. Then we cut it down. We took it the next year. That was 88. 89, we took it to La Jolla, to the La Jolla Playhouse.
Yeah.
We did it in La Jolla. Then we went over to London. We did it at the National Theatre in London.
I didn't know that.
And then we were able to get producer attention. So the following year, 1990, we took it to Broadway. By the time we got to Broadway, it was about 2.5 hours. It was really lean and mean. It was the work on it was beautiful. I mean, we kept trimming it and fixing it. Wow. But a lot happened there with The Grapes of Wrath. We won the Tony Award for Best Play that year.
Best Play of the Year, yeah.
Lois Smith was in it. She got nominated. I got nominated. We got a lot of attention for The Grapes of Wrath. Yeah. But prior to that, we had brought, a whole lot of shows there. And, the Grapes of Wrath kind of led to my association with Elaine Steinbeck, who Elaine was John Steinbeck's widow, and she controlled the rights to everything. So she was the one who gave us the rights to do The Grapes of Wrath. And
she even gave you his National Book Award, Steinbeck's National Book Award.
She did, you're right. It's in there. One time we were on stage at The Grapes of Wrath, and I said, would you give me the rights to make Of Mice and Men into a movie? And she said, honey, it's already been a film.
Why would you want to do that?
Well, it's been a film 3 times. Because there was like the 30s version, there was a Robert Blake, Robert Blake and Randy Quaid did it. There were,
but she gave it to you.
But she gave it to me. She made me a deal that was just so beautiful. Wow. She gave me the rights for free for 1 year. And so I had it for 1 year as a producer. I returned to California from The Grapes of Wrath in 1990, and I had the rights to Of Mice and Men. And so I went. I had done a little bit of development work at MGM. So I went to MGM and I said, I've got the rights to Of Mice and Men. You want to make a movie? They said yes. And it just went like that.
And that was
I got the rights for free. They said yes. I got Horton Foote to write the script, and we were shooting a year later.
And you directed it.
I directed it and acted in it. And I got Malkovich to do it because John and I had done it on stage before.
Tell me about, you evaded one of my questions. How do you prepare for these historic characters? When you got...
That was the question.
When Harry
I was trying to find my way back.
I didn't want to stop you because I'd never heard this, and I love that story. But tell me about Truman. You get Truman, it lands in your lap, you get cast as Truman. How do you prepare for this?
Yeah, it was, I had done Lieutenant Dan in Forrest Gump. That came out in '94.
Yep.
So, and it got a lot of attention, and it won a bunch of awards and all that stuff. So the career changed for me at that point. I had done Of Mice and Men as a movie and a couple other things, but I hadn't done that much before Forrest Gump in film. But when you're in a big movie like that and everything, and I had a good part, things changed.
Why did Lieutenant Dan resonate, do you think, with so many people? It wasn't just veterans.
Well, yeah, it's a great story. It's a happy ending. We've heard so many difficult stories about Vietnam veterans not being able to make it, and but Lieutenant Dan's okay in the end, and that's a beautiful story of a Vietnam veteran that really hadn't been told, in film up to that point. So along comes Lieutenant Dan. It's gets a lot of attention, and then out of the blue, right around the time we were doing right around the Oscar time, I think. A little before that, I got this offer to play Harry Truman. And I didn't know that much about Harry Truman, frankly, at the time. And I'm thinking, why would they want me to do that? That's strange. But the producers, Harry Truman is a Midwest guy. Grew up in the Midwest. I grew up in Illinois. He's from Missouri. They just saw me doing it. I had to wrap my head around that.
Really?
Yeah. So I had to study up a little bit before I could even say yes or something. I had to study up, learn a little bit about Harry Truman, figure out, can I play Harry Truman? I don't know if I can. I had to figure all that stuff out, and I finally felt, confident that I could dive into that. So once I did, then I started pouring myself into all things Harry Truman. I went to the Truman Library in Independence, Missouri. I spent days there just combing through the archives. They let me into the basement, and I could look at footage of Harry.
You want.
Yeah.
What was the trigger for you? Was there one thing that you said, oh, now I understand who he is?
Well, our script was based on a wonderful book by David McCullough.
That big doorstop book, I know it.
That was the thing and what's great about that book is it's not just this sort of dry historical thing. McCullough writes so you can read it as if Truman is a character in an emotional journey.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of emotion in the book and everything. You can really put yourself in this position of somebody who's sort of this reluctant politician who gets swept along.
Drafted into this.
Next thing he knows, he's the president of the United States. And it was a really interesting journey. But I had to dig in. I had to dig in a lot. I had to work on the accent and the voice, and I learned how to ride horses because he was in the cavalry in World War I. All this stuff we had to do. We had to age. Harry Truman was one movie, and that spanned 35 years of his life.
Yeah.
Wow. So the difficulty there, of course, is that you don't want it to be sort of the Cliff's Notes version of a life, right? But you're trying to tell 35 years of somebody's life, and Truman just it was all in. Submerge yourself into it, and it won a bunch of awards and did really well, and think the career was starting to take off at that point.
Tell me, I know there was a big shift after 9/11 for you, at least in your own mind and heart. But back in 1994, Gary, you, right after Forrest Gump, you're addressing a group of disabled veterans. Tell me about that moment and what you learned in that moment.
That was Forrest Gump came out in on July 6, 1994, 30 years ago.
Wow.
And shortly after that, I received an invitation to come to the National Convention of the Disabled American Veterans Organization, which I was not aware of. Didn't know the organization at all, but they'd been around for decades and decades. And so I kind of looked into what is it, and at that point, they represented about 1.5 million wounded veterans going back to World War II. And they wanted to give me an award for playing Lieutenant Dan, a wounded guy.
Yeah.
And they thought I did a good job, and they wanted to kind of bring me out there and kind of give me something. So I went to their convention that year. It was in Chicago, and I went to the Conrad Hilton in Chicago in August of '94, just maybe 6 weeks after the movie came out. And I'm standing on stage. In fact, the first pages of my book, Grateful American, describe this moment of walking out on stage and looking out in the crowd, and there's 2,000 wounded veterans out in this ballroom, and they're all cheering for me. And I was so moved by it, and just kind of the impact that was made by seeing all these wheelchairs and just wounded folks just applauding me for playing this part was profound. And so I stayed in touch with them and started working with them and supporting them over the years. And I think the Tracers experience of working with on that and getting involved with local Vietnam veterans groups in Chicago, 10 years later, the Lieutenant Dan experience, getting involved with our wounded, supporting them, those were seeds that were being planted that would grow into this full-on mission after September 11th, 2001, and I just felt like called to action at that point to get involved in a deeper way. Both those things, the Tracers experience and Lieutenant Dan,
acclaim after the film. I mean, it was a cultural moment, but for the veterans community, they saw themselves in a positive light. And as you mentioned earlier, if you look at the Vietnam films and those stories told before, it always ended horribly for them. Yeah, it was depressing and dark.
Or you always wondered, I'm just not sure that Vietnam veteran's going to be okay after this film is over.
Yeah.
Like, look at the Coming Home.
Right, that's what came to mind, Coming Home.
Yeah, you see Bruce Dern, what's he do? He's so racked with guilt and everything. He takes off his uniform and swims out in the ocean, and he's not coming back.
Right.
You wonder at the end of Platoon when Charlie Sheen is flying over the battlefield and he's looking down and he sees all these bodies and, the battle is over and a lot of buddies are gone. And he's flying off at the end of that movie. You just wonder, that guy's going to have a tough time going into life. Casualties of War, the same thing with Michael J. Fox. And then you got, Martin Sheen at the end of Apocalypse Now. You got, look what happens to Chris Walken at the end of Deer Hunter.
Deer Hunter. These are all dark endings. That's what I mean. They're all dark to semi-dark endings. Lieutenant Dan is the only happy ending.
That's what was different about it.
And they are still talking about it and watching it today. So after 9/11, what happens? When do you start the band, the Lieutenant Dan band?
I was doing, I'll tell you, in 1997, I was in Chicago and I was doing, so I'd done Truman and I just finished shooting George Wallace in January or February of 97. And then I went to Chicago to play Stanley Kowalski.
Oh, that's right.
In Streetcar named Desire. And I was on stage in Streetcar, and there was a guy who had written the music for Streetcar named Kimo Williams. And Kimo, he was a bass player, but he liked to play guitar, and he heard I was a bass player. So he said, hey, if you ever want to come over and jam, come on over. And so I was so busy during the run of the show, I could never do it. I was tired, it's a
heavy part,
show. I just wanted to get through it. And So right at the end, we wrapped the show. I got a couple of days before I'm going to fly back to California, and I called him up and said, why don't we get some pizza and we'll get some guys and we'll play. And I went over to his house and started playing. So that kind of rekindled some bass stuff in me. I used to play bass and guitar and everything. I put it away when I was gotten so busy with Steppenwolf and everything. I hadn't really played much. So, but playing, it really got me going again. And then I went, shortly after that, I went up to Atlantic City and then Montreal to do a movie with Nick Cage called Snake Eyes. And when I was up doing Snake Eyes in Canada, there were some guys on the crew that played. And so we went and started playing. And I called Chemo up and said, come on up here and play with us. So he flew up to Montreal, and we were playing. And then after September 11th, I wanted to do more for the troops. And I started going on USO tours and handshaking and taking pictures. And I went to the war zones a couple of times. I went to Germany. I went to Italy. I went to Walter Reed. I was doing all this stuff in 2003. Going 1 month after another to some military base or something like that.
Just meet and greets, or you got the band? No band?
No, it was a series of meet and greets for 6 or 7 months. I was going out. Didn't have a job at that time that was keeping me in town. But I wanted to help our troops. We'd been attacked, and I wanted to do something. And so I started visiting them, and I had, because I had some jammers that I would play with from time to time, I said to the USO, let me take them on a tour. And eventually they said, okay. And so I called up Chemo and said, hey, let's put some folks together and let's go. And so we started touring, and that's what began the Lieutenant Dan Band. Chemo left the band after a while, and we've now the band has played. We played 575 concerts on military bases.
Incredible.
I've been to over 175 military bases myself. And hospitals and all that stuff.
Why do you still do it, Gary?
Once I started doing it, I could see that it was impactful. It was in a positive way, like it was good that I was there. I'd walk into a hospital room, and maybe there'd be a wounded soldier, service member in the bed, completely unconscious. Hadn't woken up yet. Family is standing around waiting for that moment, praying for that moment, and I come in, and they've been there for weeks, just dealing with the issues, and somebody like me comes in, and their faces light up, and start taking pictures, and it changes the mood, it changes the tone, and I could see that showing up was making a difference. So then I wanted to do it again, and I wanted to do it again after that, and I just kept wanting to do it because I could see that it was helping. Of course, if I hadn't felt that it was helping, I wouldn't. There'd be no Gary Sinise Foundation.
Right.
I mean,
how did the foundation start? Tell me about the founding. So you're out doing these USO tours with the band. I know you're also collaborating with other organizations that are building homes for veterans and helping veterans in various ways. And you're donating a lot of the money from these concerts to these partner organizations. But when do you start your own foundation? What was the impetus for that?
Well, when I started making those tours, those early tours, just volunteering to go to the hospitals or, go shake hands or something, or, now take the band and go play on military bases and whatnot. One of the things that I also wanted to do was to try to help more people, was to volunteer for a lot of different other organizations. There were a lot of service organizations out there that were supporting veterans and first responders. And I wanted to help veterans and first responders. So I would volunteer to, raise money for these organizations. raise awareness for what they were doing by doing PSAs or whatever. So I just started volunteering wherever I could for multiple organizations. So I learned a lot about all these different needs, and organizations were filling this need. We were building homes for our wounded. We were taking care of our Gold Star children, our families of our fallen. Entertainment, whatever it was a lot of different things, and I supported a lot of different organizations. After doing that for 10 years or whatever it was clear that this was something that was just a big part of my life, and I started thinking, well, I've got to find a way to do this in a different way. And I've seen all these nonprofits pop up, and I've tried to help them all. Why don't I just start my own? And at that point, I had been doing it long enough that I had a pretty good reputation with, trying to help. And so that's why I put my name on the foundation. I called it the Gary Sinise Foundation, because there was already I already had a relationship with the military community.
All these veteran families, yeah.
And I had been raising money for all these other organizations. I was on television, weekly, and CSI New York. So I just said, let's do it. I want to do more. And I think the way to do that is to start raising our own money so that I can hire people to do more. So we started out very small, a couple of people, and now we've got a giant organization now.
Gary reminds us that sometimes you have to do things yourself, and in the doing, the entire world is changed. Such was the case with Henry Ford, and wait until you hear how it ends. Ford was working the night shift at the Edison Illuminating Company in 1896. He spent his days trying to build a horseless carriage with a gas-powered engine. He finally built a prototype which he called the quadricycle. In the late 1890s, he found backing and opened the Detroit Automotive Company. Ford attempted to streamline his design, but he couldn't quite get it right. And by 1901, his backers had had enough, and they shut the company down. Ford decided to focus on lighter, smaller vehicles, and he went into a new partnership, which he called the Henry Ford Company. But when his partners tried to control his creativity, Ford left the company which bore his name. He had failed twice in his attempt to create what he called a motor car for the great multitude. How could he do it cheaply and quickly enough to stay in business? Learning from his previous failures, Ford launched the Model A, then the Model N, and later the Model T, a stripped-down car with no frills, available in one color, black. Inspired by the assembly lines of canneries and slaughterhouses and breweries, he created a mass production assembly line for his cars. By December of 1913, he cut production time from 12 hours a car to an hour and a half. In 84 steps, each worker added a different piece of machinery or component to the car. In the year 1914, Ford was able to produce more than 308,000 cars, more than any of his competitors, which only drove down the price of the Model T and ensured Ford's dominance of the industry. Henry Ford's innovation, his assembly line, would change the way food, furniture, toys, and yes, vehicles are produced to this day. Now you know how it ends, and that sometimes, if it doesn't exist, you have to build it yourself. Now back to our conversation with another build-it-yourselfer, Gary Sinise. Give me a sense, and I won't make you go through every program, but you all do things that I don't see other organizations doing. And I want to hone in on a few of those. Years ago, I know you took over the Snowball Express program. Tell me about that. I mean, I've covered it. It's one of the most moving and I think amazing and important moments at Christmas time, I think, of almost any organization in the country.
It's beautiful. It's focused on the children of our fallen heroes, and it was started at Disneyland in 2006 by a group of folks that just wanted to help the kids of our fallen heroes. and help them through the holidays by taking them to a happy place like Disneyland and letting them play and letting them meet each other.
Yeah.
To see that they weren't alone, in their grief and what they were going through. There's a lot of other kids that have lost a parent in military service. And it was very bonding and healing. I got involved with it the second year. They had done one event at Disneyland. I was shooting CSI New York in Studio City. They contacted me and said they wanted to come and show me a video of their first event. And I saw that. I said I wanted to be involved. I volunteered to donate my band the following year to come play for the kids. I did that. Then I went back the next year. Then I donated and just kept doing it every year, helping to raise money or raise awareness or raise spirits by bringing the band and playing for the kids. I've done it, I don't know. We're in our 18th year now.
I know it's a while.
Snowball's in its 18th year. So in 2018, having American Airlines is a big sponsor of ours with multiple programs, but American had actually gotten very involved. And so the event moved from Anaheim and Disneyland after 3 years to Dallas, and because that's the hub of American Airlines, they've got a lot of good support there. They could do a lot of things for the kids, so it was there for a number of years. And then I mentioned to the folks that were kind of in charge of it at that time, hey, I've been narrating this show at Disney World for a dozen years. And that's a great place for the kids. I think we should take it there. Well, it was going to cost a lot of extra money to do that. And that's when we decided to fold Snowball Express into the Gary Sinise Foundation as one of our programs. Because we had the ability to raise the amount of money to, you're taking 1,000 kids to Disney World, you got to get a lot of hotel rooms and all,
Yeah, no, it's a logistical and transportation.
It's a big thing. So American provides all the transportation. Multiple charter airplanes that come from all over the country with these kids on board. All the people, all the flight attendants, all the pilots. Everybody volunteers their time.
Wow.
American donates the planes. We get all the kids to Disney. My foundation is it's the Gary Sinise Foundation program. So we raise all the additional money to do everything.
How long are they there?
Park passes and the hotels and the food and everything like that. It costs a lot of money. Hundreds and hundreds of volunteers, and we bring them in on a Saturday. And they're there till like Wednesday.
Wow!
And it's
life changing for these kids.
A lot of days of fun and healing for these kids. Yeah. They make lifelong friendships with another kid who's lost a parent.
Tell me about the Soaring Valor program, which we were talking about the other day. Which I knew, I've seen them when I'm in and out of airports, particularly down in New Orleans. I didn't realize the other part of this, that it's not just veterans of war that you're bringing in on these Soaring Valor trips.
Well, Soaring Valor is, I have, that's one that started with my relationship with the National World War II Museum in New Orleans. And Tom Hanks invited me to, he was helping to make the movie that plays in the theater there called Beyond All Boundaries. Mm-hmm. And so Tom called some of his pals to do voices in the movie, and I did the voice of Ernie Pyle. And this goes back to 2009 or so. Yeah. So I did the voice of Ernie Pyle, and then I sent my uncle there, who was a navigator on a B-17 bomber over Europe in World War II, and they recorded my uncle on video for the archive at the museum, and that's one of the programs that they have. Yeah. At the museum, where they tried to get as many World War II veterans to tell their stories on camera, and they preserve them in their archives. Mm-hmm. And they use these stories throughout the museum. So you'll go to an exhibit, you'll hit a thing, and an elderly World War II veteran will come out and start telling his story.
Right.
And then you see all this stuff there, and he's telling the story of what it was like to try to take that bridge or whatever it is. So these, you know, that after my uncle died, my Uncle Jack died in 2014. I called them and I said, "Can you send me that video of my Uncle Jack?" Yeah. They sent me the video, and I watched it, and I was, you know, just tears, and I got so moved by it. I called them up and I said, "You know, I'm so lucky that I have this video of my uncle. Everyone who has a World War II veteran should have a video of them telling their stories like this. Is there anything I can do to help you get more of these stories, to make sure that we preserve more of these stories?" And they said, "You know, why don't you fund some of our historians?" So I said, "Great, we'll fund historians to go out around the country and videotape these World War II veterans. And here's another thing that I'd like to do. I'm going to approach my friends at American Airlines, and I'm going to pitch them an idea to fly World War II veterans down to the National World War II Museum to see this museum, because they are all over the country, and many of them will never see this museum that was built for them."
Yeah.
And so getting them there is super important. So I want to start a program where we can fly these veterans down there. So we started taking veterans in 2015. And then in 2017, I thought, let's add another component to this. And I pitched that to my team at the foundation and also to American. And I said, I want to take high school kids on these trips with the veterans and pair up a high school student with a World War II veteran, and they travel together
and experience the museum.
And experience the museum with somebody who lived through the experience. It'll be an education unlike anything they'll ever get. Well, now we've done 27 trips, something like that, taking World War II veterans and students down to the National World War II Museum. And you can go on the Gary Sinise Foundation website and look at our YouTube channel, and you'll see a whole bunch of videos of how special it is for these kids to spend this time with these American heroes.
No, it's beautiful. It's beautiful. And you're also teaching that generation the cost of their freedom and what there's nothing like being confronted. I remember taking my kids to, we were walking through the Marines Museum out in Virginia. And as we passed through, there was a retired elderly Marine who had been at Iwo Jima.
Yeah.
Well, my kids were just fascinated because we'd just come out of this Iwo Jima exhibit, and here was the living embodiment of it. And this man, he sat with my kids for like a half hour, and you could see the tears rolling down his face because A, they were interested in what he had gone through, and B, he was passing it along to a younger generation, and they were excited about it. So the wonder of what you're creating there and passing the history along is so critical and important.
It's beautiful, Raymond. I mean, when you see it time after time, I did the first. It's been a while since I've been able to get on a trip, but I did the first 12 to 15 trips. Every one of these trips, helping these veterans get through the museum and watching them interact with the students and watching the students interact with them and the students opening their eyes to what it is. I mean, the cost of freedom is high. Yeah. And, they learn from these veterans what they did that relates to them today.
Right.
I mean, without us winning that war, the Allies winning that war, the world would have been completely different, and they would have grown up in a completely different America.
I remember my son telling me after meeting that Iwo Jima veteran, when we were leaving, he said, "Dad, he's not that much older than I am now when he went to war." I said, "That's right. That's the lesson." These were boys who went off to defend this freedom.
Yeah. It's incredible.
It is an incredible sacrifice. And
that's a beautiful program, though.
Yeah, I'll say. No, the Soaring Valor is incredible. And all of your programs. I mean, your wellness programs. You have the RISE program, which is about giving homes to severely disabled vets. I mean, we could spend an afternoon talking about all the programs. You should go to Gary Sinise Foundation website and look at it all. It's incredible work. I want to talk, though, about the string that I see that runs through your life. Really from the time you're in Steppenwolf, founding the foundation, and then in your personal life. And there is this string of sacrifice that I see running through it, and devotion to others. In 2018, your son Mac is diagnosed with a very rare form of cancer on his spine. It turns into tumors that are popping out that the doctors can't control. Your wife endured multiple surgeries. At the same time, she's having her own cancer battle. How did you contend with all this, first of all? What did you think was happening?
Well, it's just like you're getting punched, you know. When we found out my wife, there was, she had a mammogram, and then we didn't hear anything for a bit, so we just assumed, well, maybe everything's okay. Then, I don't know, maybe a month later, we get this letter that said, we'd like you to come back in for another check, like a month later. We're like, what?
What's this?
Yeah, so a month later, we go back in, she gets another test, and then they want her to go and see the surgeon, and he confirms that she has, cancer in her lymph nodes, and that she's going to need surgery. So they did a lumpectomy on my wife, which, she didn't have to, it's not a mastectomy, she didn't lose her breast, but they did a lumpectomy where they took out 19 nodes, and then 5 of them were infected with cancer. And it was successful surgery, according to him, but she was going to need to go through chemo and radiation. She started chemo, she went through, all the chemo treatments, 35 radiation treatments. And during that time, not too long after she had had her initial surgery, Mac was having trouble with, he was in pain when he was sitting down, and like his tailbone was hurting him. So we sent him to a Moira's spine surgeon, and I get this call that Mac has a tumor on his sacrum. I'm sitting there with Moira, talking about her breast cancer. I get a call, Mac's now got cancer. And it's something called chordoma, which is a very, very rare cancer. I mean, so rare. When you think of rare, you think in the United States, well, maybe that's 5,000 people or something. This is 300 per year. 300 per year are diagnosed with this kind of tumor. And it starts in the spine. It can start up here, at the top of the spine or at the bottom of the spine.
Oof.
And with Mac, that tumor was this big, wrapped around his sacrum. And it's such a slow-growing tumor that it could very possibly have been growing since birth, that long, because it grows very, very slowly. To get to that size, they said that could have been there for a long, long time. And the only way to cure it is to take it out, and hopefully the surgeon gets every cell, every bit of it. And that can happen successfully about 70% of the time, but 30% of the time they will take it out, and then it'll come back and spread. And when it comes back and spreads, there's very little that can be done. They try to radiate it, They try any drug, any cancer drug they can. We found out he had his initial tumor taken out in September of 2018, and by May of 2019, we found out that cancer came back. So then he went into like chemo treatments, radiation stuff, more surgeries because now it was spreading
to the neck, right?
He had tumors on his neck. He had, in fact, see this picture back here.
Yeah.
That is 5 days before he had to go in the hospital and get tumor taken off his neck.
Wow.
In fact, when he wasn't on camera or getting his picture taken, they gave him a neck brace to wear when they discovered that there was tumor on his neck. They didn't want him to do anything that would, pop anything, or that tumor was growing there and it could fracture something. So they gave him a neck brace, and he was wearing a neck brace until we got into the hospital 5 days after that picture was taken there. And he's also going through chemo and radiation, and they kept. He had multiple spine surgeries because he was in a lot of pain, and the only thing they could do was try to take the tumors off his spine. Each time they did that, he became a little more disabled, until finally, at the end of 2020, this was 2020, he was in a wheelchair, and then he was still able to stand up. But shortly after that, he lost the use of his legs. I remember coming in. I would come in and I would stretch his legs out and have him push, his legs. And I came in and I said, "Okay, lift your leg up, bud." And he couldn't do it. And he couldn't lift his leg up, and he just looked at me. He couldn't do it. And he took it in stride, Raymond. I mean, he was like he's laying there. I think he knew something was happening because it was getting harder and harder to move his leg. And then when it happened, it was like, can't do it, Dad.
He was resigned to it.
Yeah, it wasn't like he started crying or anything. He was just, we're in a different world now. Now
we've moved to a new place.
We're in another level of what we got to do.
The amazing thing to me is through all of this, I mean, in 2021, you lose your father. Your wife is still battling cancer. Mac is now battling cancer. But Mac's mission and his love of music never wanes, Gary. In fact, I would argue, well, you named the album, or he did, Resurrection and Revival. It resurrects and revives him in the last year of his life. Tell me about that, what you saw, the drive you saw in him, and the impact it had on you.
Yeah, this record, this is part two of the first record. Mm-hmm. The first record, in February of 2023, he'd been fighting cancer and all of that, and he said to me, "Dad, there's a piece of music that I wrote that I never finished in college, and I think I'd like to try and finish it." So he contacted one of my band members who he'd worked with a little bit on some things, and my violin player, Dan, and Dan went to work with him on it to help him kind of flesh out the ideas, and then my piano player went to work on it with him. Ben Lewis, helping him. Ben would play things for him and then send it back to Mac, and he'd make notes and send it back to Ben, then Ben would adjust. And then his buddy, Oliver Schnee, came into the picture, who he hadn't seen for a while. Oliver went to college with him.
Yeah.
And they hadn't seen each other for a long time. And Mac played him this piece of music that he'd been working on, and Oliver went to work on it with him to finish it. They went into the studio in July of 2023 and recorded the piece Arctic Circles, which is on Mac Sinise YouTube now.
Yeah.
That started the ball rolling for Mac wanting to do an entire album. And that's where Resurrection and Revival came from. I don't know why he decided that was the title, but
he named it.
Mac did. Yeah, it was his project.
Well, clearly it was resurrection and revival of his music.
Yeah.
But now, in the light of what we know and what's happened, it takes on a far greater significance.
Yeah. It was reviving him, personally, to be resurrecting some old pieces of music and bringing them to new life. And, even that cover right there,
Who is this?
That's my grandfather and his great-grandfather in World War I.
Who kind of looks like Mac, I have to say, and you.
A little bit.
But he looks a little bit like Mac.
He does.
In fact, when I saw it, I thought, oh, he superimposed his face on an old picture. But it's not. It's a relative.
No, he kind of revived that picture. One of the things he did when he was working at the foundation was kind of preserve things in our archive, and he would take, like I had a lot of these old pictures of my grandfather from World War I, and he took them and kind of lightened them up and fixed them up, made them look better and everything. And his mom, he was looking for one of those pictures to use on the cover, and he showed his mom one over here, and she said, "What about that one with Grandpa on the horse?" And Mac went back and got that, and he looked at it and he thought, "You're right, Mom. That's a great shot."
I had you on the show on my show on AWTN on Fox when the first album came out, and as I listened to you now, you said when Mac saw these pictures, he would brighten them up and revive them. But it seems to me now you've released the second album of his work, some of which you discovered like hidden treasure in his devices after his death. You are the one who has now brightened and revived and restored these works that he left you in many ways.
Yeah. Well, finding these musical treasures on his laptop after he died was a blessing, because it's given me this project, throughout this first year of our lives without Mac, that has really helped me through quite a bit. It's resurrected me and revived me a bit from this terrible grief that we're going through after losing him. And I'm grateful for that. Not everybody loses somebody and then has, a treasure trove of music to produce or something like that.
And messages you've told me. I mean, you were clearly opening these devices. I'm sure the first impulse wasn't, I'm going to go find some more music. You were looking for clues and a sense of what he was going through, I imagine.
I don't know what I was looking for, Raymond. After he died, I don't know, within days, I just went to his phone and I just opened up his phone. I had his password and I opened up his phone and I started looking at his text messages with people, and I found voicemails of people that sent him, that called him the day he died, not knowing that he was gone, or shortly after he died, not knowing he was gone. These are friends that I didn't really know very well. So, and I found these voice messages. So I ended up calling these friends of his and telling them, we lost Mac. He's, I just wanted you to know I found this voicemail that you left. I found text messages from different people. In fact, one of the songs on the record, he calls it quasi love. I know quasi is the pronunciation, but Mac wanted to kind of do something different with it.
His own jazz variation.
His own thing. And so I found him singing into his phone the melody for this song into his voice message. And he was writing a song in his head, and he was singing it into his song. Then I found the chart for it, and then I found text messages between him and my violin player, Dan, talking about this song. And so I went to Dan and said, "What were you working on another song with Mac besides Arctic Circles?" And he said, "Oh yeah, Mac had this cool idea and blah blah blah." And I said, "Well, finish that song because we're going to put it on. doing
The
another
second
record,
album.
and I want it on the record. And so it's on the record. And I just found all kinds of things on his phone, Raymond, that I don't even know what I didn't know what I was looking for. I was just driven to find things and find what was happening at the end of his life. Who was he talking to, and do they know what happened? And so I had to let them know. And
what's the message? What did you discover that you didn't know that he was going through at the end of his life, Gary, through all of this?
I never wanted to have that sort of what if conversation with Mac. Mac, we're fighting cancer, and it's tough, and what if this happens? I never wanted to have that conversation with him. Do you want me to do this, or do you want me to do that? There was only one time where I asked him about something. What would you want to happen with your bank account? Because he'd saved a lot of money. And what would you want to happen, and he paid for the first record himself. I mean, out of his savings and everything. But he saved a fair amount of money, and so I asked him, and he told me what he would want with that. But then I didn't want to have that conversation with him, because I didn't want him or me to feel like we were looking at the end of the road. I was always from the get-go trying to find the drug, trying to find the doctor, trying to find the procedure. What can we try? Where can we try it? In fact, Mac was getting ready to do another treatment when he ended up in the hospital the last time. He was scheduled for another treatment, and then he ended up going into the ER because he had his breathing was affected, and we lost him on January 5th.
What did he teach you about sacrifice and staying on mission? Did he teach you anything?
Well, yeah. He fought this with such grace and courage that, I can only hope that I'm going to be as graceful and courageous when, things get tough, for me. Because I watched him knowing that he knew how bad things were for him, and yet he never stopped smiling through it. If he was not in pain or not feeling sick from the treatments, he was smiling. He was watching the Cubs. He was a big Cubs fan all through the summer of 2023. He was watching TV with his mom, watching the Cubs. My mom was in there, all three. Moira, my mom, and Mac all had their Cub hats on, and they're all watching the Cub games. He was smiling through that. He was playing his harmonica. He was working on the music the entire last year of his life. He was focused on creating this album. And so he was filled with like joy and happiness for what he was doing. And it was giving him this amazing thing to look forward to every day. Is I'm making a record. I'm going into the studio. He was in the studio in July 2023. He was back in the studio in November 2023. The record was finished in December. He heard all the music. He designed the cover, and he saw the final videos that were made. And then a day later, he was in the hospital, and we lost him 6 days later. So that whole last year, he was filled with joy and happiness of working on this music and accomplishing this thing that he wanted to do. And it's beautiful music. I mean, it's stunning. So I watched him just gracefully go through the last year of his life, being paralyzed, being, struggling with different things, yet Mac never, ever looked like he was giving up.
Well, I love how you've continued. You took the baton from him and in his passing, finished the work. Because now you've gotten two more I mean, it's really two more albums. I know it's Resurrection and Revival Part 2. It's actually Part 3 too. I mean, you've got a lot here.
Double disc.
It's a double disc. I mean, it's a lot of music. It's 19 tracks, and they're very diverse. There's jazz. There's orchestral. There's beautiful harmonica with strings. I mean, the diversity of his musical palette is pretty wide and kind of fascinating. And I imagine as a father, I mean, I listen to it one way, but I'm sure as a dad, you listen to it and go, wow, I didn't realize that he had that in him. Or I didn't know he felt that. Because, I mean, it's a wash of feeling. That's really what this is. It's an album. It's a wash of feelings. And
yeah, some of the stuff I discovered I was totally just like, wow, why didn't he play that for me? It's so beautiful. There's a song called Just for Now on it that he did all on his computer programs. A lot of the stuff he would write, on his programs, like Just for Now, he did everything on his programs. We took the Just for Now track that Mac created with the original vocals and everything like that. We added some strings on top of some of it. Just to give it a little more, but the track could have been put on the record all by itself because Mac did it. It's just a beautiful song. His friend from college, Lou Roy, sings on it. She's got a beautiful voice. She sings on 3 of the songs on the record. There's other music on the record that Mac did all by himself. Yeah. There's a cover of Nature Boy, the old song by Nat King Cole.
I was a boy.
Yeah. Mac does a version of Nature Boy where he plays all the instruments and he sings. And he recorded everything himself.
And he had that all on the computer? Where was this?
That was in his files.
Wow.
Yeah, in his files.
What do you think he would say if he saw this? Part 2. What would he say to you?
What would he say to me? I hope he'd say, let's do Part 3.
He may give it to you yet, Gary. Yeah. Okay, there's a string of questions I ask I call this my Arroyo Grande questionnaire. Okay. So now you're going to be subjected to it. These are fast. You don't have to spend much time on these. But I'm warning you, they are deadly questions. You ready? Who's the person you most admire?
Jesus.
Who do you most detest?
Oh, I can't say that.
Come on.
I can't.
Everybody tries to dodge me on that
You
one.
right now.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, for asking that question, you awful person, you. What is your best feature?
I don't know. Maybe, hard to say. Persistence, maybe.
Persistence. What's your worst? Your worst feature?
Maybe persistence.
The double-edged sword of persistence. Well, you don't build a foundation and call it the Gary Sinise Foundation without a little persistence. Your favorite meal, Gary?
Oh, dear. Gosh, maybe one of my favorite meals is chicken piccata.
Chicken piccata?
Yeah.
Well, I see, I evade that because I like anything Italian. So my favorite meal is one I get to eat with family or friends. That's my favorite meal. Like the one I had last night with somebody.
But my dad used to make chicken piccata, and that's a good meal. But I like a lot of food, so who knows?
What do you fear, Gary?
Failure, maybe. Maybe loss.
Your greatest virtue is what? What do you consider the greatest virtue? Not your greatest virtue, but what do you consider the greatest virtue?
Honesty, maybe.
Honesty. Why?
Well, if you're not honest, nobody's going to trust you.
Yeah. What's that old line? My great-grandmother had a line. If you lie, you cheat. If you cheat, you steal. If you steal, you're no good. I guess that's true. What could you not live without?
Air.
Yeah, well, that's a good answer, I guess. It's kind of universal, Gary.
Oxygen. Yeah.
What is your biggest regret?
Oh, gosh. You know, I've thought about this with regards to Mac, and just wishing that I had, in those final days, I had asked him if he was afraid. And let him talk to me a little bit more, but neither of us wanted to go there, you know. I don't know if that's my biggest regret, but when I think of it, I wished I'd, before he was unable to speak again, you know, because he lost that capacity with what was going on with his lungs. It went so quickly that I wished that I had spent more time in those last days having, you know, having some kind of more in-depth conversation with him about his feelings.
Yeah.
You know, of what he'd been through and what he was going through. But again, like I said, I never wanted to feel like I was giving up, you know.
Yeah. You were in the fight. And I would argue, if you'll permit me, you helped fill his last year and those last days with great joy and accomplishment for Mac. I mean, I saw that from the little piece we did after Christmas, just on the cusp of the new year. The reaction he had to that and the pride he had in that, showing it to other people, and that was all you're doing. So, and it was the culmination of his work.
And his mom and his two sisters, he loved them so much, and they loved him so much, and you know, we all pulled together, and they were a big part of everything, no question. Without their support, I couldn't have gone through everything I was doing, and they were helping Mac in so many ways, so many beautiful ways.
What is the best piece of advice you've ever received?
The one I always give this one to like young actors who ask me for advice.
Yeah.
And I save your money.
Is that the best piece, Gary? Save your money. That's to all the broke actors out there. A little. I know the feeling.
Right. Save your. Things are good today, but they might not be good tomorrow.
Save your money.
Save your money.
Okay, I guess it's good advice. If you could not do what you're doing now, what would you like to do?
These are difficult questions because I don't ever think about that. You know, I'm fairly I'm at peace with what I'm doing. I've done a lot of things in my life with a career, and I've got a great family. My family is great. I maybe spend more and more time with my family. You know. I'm still trying to accomplish a lot with the foundation work and the band and supporting the troops, and that takes me away sometimes. And, you know, my wife is just the best person I know, and, you know, and I look at how she has sacrificed for this mission that I've been on, because she spent a lot of time without me there because I've been going somewhere to do something. And she's a real hero and my biggest champion, you know. Her brother served in Vietnam, and she always wanted me to go out there and try to make sure that our service members know they're appreciated, because her brothers didn't get that when they came home. And so she's been backing me up every step of the way. So just spending more time with them, and that, you know, that's the important thing, and the grandkids and all that.
Final question. What happens when this is over? Not the interview, this life.
Well, I hope I'll be welcomed. And Lord will say, good job.
I think you'll not only be welcomed, you'll hear familiar music, maybe Arctic Circles played when you get there, my friend. So great to see you. God bless you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Raymond.
Gary Sinise is such an incredible person. His sense of sacrifice and commitment to his art, the veterans, and the mission of his son is just, it's inspiring. And if you haven't heard Max Sinise's Resurrection and Revival, go to his YouTube page and order copies at GarySiniseFoundation.org. Here's the takeaway. There is so much there to unpack, but I love that line. I had to find a way to do it differently. I had to build my own. Gary built a theater company, an amazing career, and one of the most active veteran service organizations in the country. I hope you'll support his good work. And come back next time, and as I mention on every episode, why live a dry, constricted, narrow life when if you fill it with good things, it can flow into a broad, thriving Arroyo Grande? I'm Raymond Arroyo. Make sure you subscribe, like this episode. Thank you for diving in, and we'll see you next time. Arroyo Grande is produced in partnership with iHeart Podcasts and is available on the iHeartRadio app or wherever you get your podcasts.